Hi, I'm George Popi, one of the founders of Chaos. When starting a business, it is super easy to get lost in the details and not see the forest for the trees. So to keep my sanity while creating chaos, I've decided to sit down with other entrepreneurs to learn about how they navigate their own personal and business lives. Hopefully, you'll learn a thing or two along the way. You're listening to That Startup Life podcast. This week, I'm joined by Tom Zalatni, the executive producer of the UpfordNetwork. And so welcome, Tom.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me. Mm-hmm. It's nice to be back in the Chaos office again.
Yeah, in the studio. Oh, man, we've done so much.
It's really cool. Kudos to you for this. It's a really good space.
What got you started? Because I know really the network came out of your first podcast, which was Up for Discussion.
That's right, yeah. My philosophy with creating things has always been, if there's something I want to see exist in the world, I should just make it. If I can. If it's not something I can make, then forget it. But if it's something that I have the means to create, nothing is really stopping me from making it, right? And I let myself not make things for a very long time because I was really just pouring myself into someone else's project who didn't appreciate the work I was doing. And eventually I got out of that partnership and started just focusing on what I want to see exist. And that was huge. So I started Up for Discussion almost 4 years ago now. And at the time, it was really just a chance to play around with podcasting and see a couple of people week after week put out content regularly that was minimal production. Because the nice thing about podcasts, if they're just audio, is that it's really minimal work, right? Unless you're producing something that's an NPR kind of thing where you spend 10 hours on each episode, you can really hit record, make sure all the levels sound good, and then your editing can take at minimum, an hour and a half for an hour-long episode. It's really easy. And that was really satisfying for me because I had done so much work in video over the years that, sometimes you start a video project, you don't get it out for months. Something goes wrong. Sometimes you just don't put it out. Podcasting felt lower stakes. So I started doing that. And then through that, realized I had a lot of friends who liked doing that kind of thing and was okay, that's really cool. And I'm going to make an effort to work with these guys. But it wasn't always people who wanted to do the same kind of podcast I was doing, which meant the room for crossover wasn't always there, right? You kind of have to stretch to get your guests to fit in if you're doing a comedy podcast and they're not comedy people. So when they started reaching out to me saying hey, we'd love to use your equipment to make our own shows, I was that sounds cool, but I didn't want to do that just for free, right? I didn't want it to be just a favor, you know, because I feel I just don't have time to only do favors for people, you know? I can't. I'm an adult. I have kids. It's
just not sustainable.
Exactly.
At all. And we've talked about this many times throughout the years.
Yeah. That's it. And so a big thing for me was how can I make this a mutually beneficial thing? And that was got me started thinking about networking, right? Because what is the bare minimum that people can do to help each other out in this world is share each other's stuff. And to take that a step further is to cross promote. So our network started with 2 comedy shows and a sports show. And the audience for a sports journalism show is not necessarily the same as the audience for a comedy show, but you never know when the listeners of your comedy show might also like sports journalism. And you never know when the listeners of your journalism show might want something to kind of kick back and relax after hearing something heavy about whatever's going on in the world of sports. And the more kind of niches you hit, the better. So that got us thinking, what if we just start this network with 3 shows and then gradually add to it, right? Try to, launch new content that will hit those niches as well. Try to bring in shows that exist from outside so that we don't have to produce all of them. This idea of building a community really intentionally of people who share the values we share, who want to make high quality content without breaking the bank.
I am so astounded at times where you really went with a grassroots kind of approach where it's everyone. And as a creator, I love that. As a business person, my mind would kind of be oh my God, how to kind of keep that up.
I was bad enough at using my credit card that I now have all the equipment I really need. I have $20,000 of credit card debt that I'm really open about because, I hope that if I say it enough times on recorded media, some angel investor will come save me, But yeah, I made all those investments really intentionally and then was at a place where I was well, I have all this equipment. I can use it however I want. And if I don't have the time personally to record 20 podcasts a week, other people might, right? Like I might be able to get 20 people in the studio every week recording their own thing. And then I can produce as many of them as I need to and like put them out there. And that was a way to make it possible to use things that I felt like I'd wasted money on in a way that didn't feel like a waste of money anymore. So the only reason that I've been able to afford to do this and to like have all this equipment and everything going is because I also work a full-time job on the side. And like, that's just the reality for a lot of creators, right? It's like, we don't have enough money coming in from the creative projects we do. We need to make it somewhere. And short of freelancing, which like, man, shout out to you for being able to do that, because I can't. Like, I'm not good at doing freelance work because I don't know how to price myself properly. Like I mean, I do now because we've talked about it a lot. But like, I don't like looking for freelance work. I feel like if I start taking freelance jobs, I take on too much at a time. Like having a 9-to-5 sort of setup is great for me.
It's been easier for me to do freelance because I don't have like family.
Right.
So it, like that doesn't get impeded by it. But like what has been the challenge kind of because when you started this all, you were single.
I was very single. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. So I started doing all this stuff when I was 21, I guess. And like, you know, I dated around, but I wasn't, you know, in anything serious until like a year and a half ago. And now I have kids and, you know, a partner I live with. And like, it's a lot more like I'm really a family man now. Like I've been realizing that dad is kind of becoming my brand in a way that I didn't expect it to. The flip side of, you know, being a dad now is like, it does take a lot of time. Right. So on the one hand, it's been really cool for my like personal growth. And, you know, obviously like individual stuff aside, it is really nice having a baby around. Toby is wonderful. But the thing that's challenging, obviously, is like babies take up so much time, and we're going to be putting him in daycare, which is going to be, you know, hard, I think, as a transition, but like good for productivity. But the thing that's going to be interesting is he's going to be home 2 days a week with me solo. I've never done that. I've never been home alone with the baby for more than like a couple hours. It's going to be a very interesting change seeing how like my workflow adapts to it. And if there's a recording going on in the next room, I can't even like get work done while he like fusses in the office. So I'm going to have to figure out like, you know, while people are recording on a Tuesday or Thursday, what do I do? Where do I go? I'm going to have to like take him for walks around the block and trust that people won't rob the studio, or bring him out on the balcony and like just, I don't know, be on the balcony with him. Like it's going to be a very weird transition, but I think I'm looking forward to it. What
are you doing right now to kind of start to plan for that?
As I'm mostly thinking about like, you know, there are a lot of days, you know, there'll be chunks of time where he will be home with me and there won't be recordings going on. And I'm thinking about how do I get work done while still spending time with him? How do I sort of find that balance? And a thing I've been finding out is there's a lot of like baby cafes, I guess, in our neighborhood, which is really convenient, where like you can bring your baby, and the staff who work there, you know, part of their job is to serve you coffee and sandwiches and stuff as you pay for them. The other part is just to hang out with parents. And, you know, if you're like, crap, I really need to send a couple emails, can you entertain my baby for like 20 minutes? They're just there for that, which is huge. Yeah. And also, you know, it's kind of where working parents of babies hang out. So you kind of, in a sense, I'll get to like network a little bit while hanging out with my kid. So I'm thinking I'm going to spend a lot of time in places like that, basically.
I'm really intrigued because I've never heard of someone actually taking like networking as a parent like that. That's a very interesting angle.
Yeah. I'm a networking person, right? Like my, like that's a thing that I'm good at, is like meeting new people and like quickly figuring out like, who are you? What can we talk about? What's our thing? Like, you know, is there like a relationship here? And that's not to say that I think every relationship needs to be, you know, professionally beneficial. Obviously, you can just have friends. That's fine. But
is it though? Is it really?
It's not.
Oh fuck.
But that's the thing. Like I think, you know, because I'm so used to working like 40 to 60 hours a week, like between my office job and my like network stuff, like I'm usually working like 60 hours a week, honestly. It's hard for me to take, especially weekday daytime, it's hard for me to take breaks from that without feeling guilty or feeling unproductive. And that's a challenge with having kids, is that you do have to take breaks sometimes, even if it's just like, you know, 20 minutes. You sometimes have to like go hang out with your baby for 20 minutes. And it's great it's really great having a baby, but I struggle so much with that feeling of like I am not getting things done while I'm hanging out with him. Mm-hmm. In my mind, I haven't shifted from the only thing that is productive is getting actual work done to it is productive to spend time with your kid. And I will get there eventually, I think. Possibly more once he's in daycare.
How have you been intentional when you come to hiring? It's like when you choose, like what has been your process? Because again, there's so many steps where it's really easy just to tap your own network, and it's really easy to just be like, oh, I know my friend Jimmy, he'll be fine.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that's tricky. Like the things that I tend to do anytime I've needed to hire someone for Up for Discussion, I put it out there on all of my social medias that like we're hiring X number of people for this thing. Send us an email by this date and you'll be considered. And then I go through and I look at the email, and my intake form is like, give me a little bio of yourself. Tell me who you are. What social media are you active on? Give me your handles so I can look at what you're doing. Make sure you're not, tweeting racist, homophobic shit, or, and also realistically, like make sure you have any amount of presence, right? Because if you email me applying for the job and you tell me I'm on Facebook a bit, but I don't really use social media, I'm not going to hire you. I would love to talk to you, but I'm not going to hire you because like you're not going to do your part to promote things, right? What experience do you have doing this kind of thing? Like, what do you think is the angle you personally can bring? And that's, I think, the question that always, the social media question weeds out people who like I just can't bring on. Mm-hmm. And then what do you think is your contribution to this? What would you like to do is where I go, okay, this is interesting, right? Because I don't want to hire someone whose response to that is, I just really like your format. I'm happy to come along for the ride. I want to hire someone who says, here's what you're not doing. Here's how we can do it. Here's how I would like to change that. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you're a creator who like wants to be making the world of podcasting more diverse and more accessible, you have a responsibility to hire people who do not look like you, right? I'm really glad that Up for Discussion is me and 3 women, because like it wasn't at first, right? When we started, it was 3 white dudes, 3 Christian white dudes. Like, I'm not Christian anymore, but like,
that's where it started.
Yeah, that's where it started, right? And like the 2 guys that I had on the show at the beginning have both left by now for different reasons. But the new hosts that I brought on, I was really intentional about like, I don't want this to just be a bunch of people who are exactly the same.
Yeah, like an echo chamber.
And like by doing that, you then send the message to people who aren't doing it yet that this is a space for you. You are welcome here. Hit us up. And that's it. That's all it takes to grow. And I'm not subtweeting anyone by saying this, but I'm absolutely subtweeting some people by saying this. Like, if you are doing a show in 2019 in a community that has more than just white people in it, and your show is still just white people or still just men, like something is wrong, right? Something is off there. And like, you can do something about that. Like, and I'm going to acknowledge, like, Up for Discussion, all 4 of our hosts are white. 2 of us, 3 of us, all of us? I'm not totally sure. At least 2 of us are queer. At least one of us is somewhere on the gender spectrum outside of cis. And like 3 of us are women, right? Like it is diverse in that sense, but like I'm willing to acknowledge like we're white people. Mm-hmm. And like, honestly, that is partly just that when I have hired new people, I have not had that many people of color apply, and it comes down to, it just that it hasn't happened, but like in general, like you can make that effort, right? You can like hire people intentionally, and like if they're the best for the job, obviously. Like, I'm not telling you to hire someone who sucks just as a diversity hire. Yeah. Don't do that.
Because that's a bad hire for everyone.
Exactly. And that's not, the thing is, like, if you hire someone who sucks just because they check a diversity box, that actually doesn't help the people who don't feel like they're represented, because they're going to just look and be like, that guy sucks. Nobody is going to try to find themselves represented by a performer who sucks.
Mm-hmm. It's also because it's, like the point of hiring someone that's strong, that's in a different circle, is that they bring their circle.
Yeah.
So that you then tap a bigger network of more talented people.
Right.
But if they themselves know that they're simply a diversity hire,
Yeah.
they're not engaged with what they're doing,
No.
and they're not going to open up that network. So it's kind of just in everyone's best interest that like you only hire the people that is the right person for the job.
Right.
And then,
Yeah. That's it. It would be counterproductive to hire someone who's not good at it and not invested in it.
With that, I like, because you have actually figured out a way to delegate sometimes and get people in.
Yeah.
What was that process for yourself? Because like you know everything.
Right.
Yet.
Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard because when you know how to do all the things, you start to, or at least this is true for me. I think there are people who are much better at delegating than I am. But for me, I'm not immediately comfortable delegating. You know what I mean? Like I need to delegate things that don't matter before I can delegate things that do matter. And that feels like a waste of time. So what I mean by that is like right now I edit like 8 or 9 shows myself, and like not all of them record weekly. Some of them batch record, which makes my life a little easier. But the reality is when you edit 8 or 9 shows yourself, that's like 20 hours of editing a week, like minimum. Right. Mm-hmm. And I should hire an editor, and I can't hire an editor because I don't trust anyone enough to do it, which is dumb because I would trust these people enough to like let them into my house and like be around my kids and stuff. But there's something about like, I need to get over the idea that I'm the only one who can make it work. You know what I mean? Which like there are shows on our network that I don't produce, and when I listen to them, I love them. So I should be able to do that with things that I currently produce, right? Like I should be able to hand that off to someone, but I haven't gotten there yet. And I tried once, and like it wasn't that the person didn't know how to edit, because they had edited their own stuff before, but they didn't do it quite the way that I wanted it. And I was like, it'll be easier for me to just do this. And I need to get over that, but I'm not good at it. But I can delegate things that I'm not good at. So I'm not good at like building social media audiences. So we have a social media coordinator on our network, Candace Pye, who's wonderful. And she's like very good at that. And so like, that's what she does. And I found it really easy to delegate that. I just need to get better at doing that with like technical stuff, right? Like I need to train someone else to edit. I need to take an afternoon and say like, let's sit down and edit this together so that you will know what I expect from an edit. And then have that person be allowed to come into the studio and edit things whenever. I just haven't.
Yeah. Well, no, because I constantly have that debate. Like right now, part of what we're doing is finding a technical operator, so that I am not the one running all of our productions in here.
Right.
Because it's not the fact that I can't. It's more that I realized that my brain is in so many other places that only like I can really do. Realizing that while I can do all this, there are other people who can likewise do this.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe even better than me.
Right.
And
that's the hard one, right?
Yeah.
Is letting yourself say maybe someone else will be better at this.
Yeah. And it's also that 100% they're going to do it different. And it's that scary thing of like, but like I wouldn't do it that way, but it's like, shh.
So on the like concept of hiring an editor, right? Because that's my main problem. I don't know if I would rather hire an editor who like, if I give them the raw audio and say like, show me what you would do with this. I don't know if I'd want to watch their process or just see the end file, right? Because if I watch their process, I can keep an eye out for things on the way that I can then correct. But I think it might be less stressful to just hear the end product and then go yes or no, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What I've heard with really good ways of actually hiring someone is you basically ask them to like walk you through how they would do it.
Sure.
But like you're not commenting at all throughout that. It's more just seeing how like this is like in a technical like as an editor, like if someone's actually using the hotkeys or not, or if they're just doing things manually. So it becomes a sense of how are they approaching this. And if you see that they're competent enough that they're doing things intelligently,
right,
then it's like, okay, cool, you're going to work out.
So it's weird because our shows aren't like, we don't produce things the way that like NPR produces things, where all of our hosts come in and whisper and then there's beautiful music playing in the background. And like, we don't do that, right? Like we're a little more we're kind of halfway between that and like putting a phone on the table and shouting, right? Like we have this like professional grade equipment, but I don't put in hundreds of hours of post-production into things unless someone wants to pay me to, in which case I absolutely would. And so if I was passing off one of the shows that I'm producing, I would want to make sure that I'm passing it off to someone who understands my voice, if that makes sense. And not to say my like speaking voice, but my like editing voice.
Your tone.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the way that I like things to sound. Because I had tried once to pass off editing to someone and like they put a weird compressor on it that immediately turned me off from listening to it. I was like, I have to re-edit this and like tweak it. And then like, you know, things about like where to put ads and like how to do like intro outro stuff. Like it's almost formulaic the way that I do it because it works and it sounds good. I don't know if I could hand something off to someone who didn't understand that, you know? Even though I don't think that's a rule for being on our network, because there are shows that are on our network that other people produce. And I'm like, yeah, with those, like, you do your thing, you make it sound exactly how you want it. It's a mental barrier for me. It's a control thing that I just like have not gotten over yet.
It's interesting, like have at this point, because you say that it's almost like there's kind of a template almost, like you know how the shows are going to get structured.
Right.
Like, have you actually written that down, or is it still all in your brain?
Yeah. So I haven't written down like, you know, a step-by-step instruction for editing so much as I've written down like when a new show approaches us that wants to start recording, I now have like a step-by-step, like these are the things you should have ready before your first recording session. These are the things you should have ready before you launch. This is the sort of format that you like. This is what I suggest as the format that will make your life easiest. And it's things like, you know, figuring out your theme music and your logo before you record for the first time so that you can record your outro the first time, shouting those people out. And so that as soon as you're done recording, you're theoretically ready to launch, right? Things like knowing, you know, before you even start recording, like what are 10 to 20 potential episodes I could do, right? Because I think if you come up with a list like that before you launch, then you never struggle to find content, right? Like if your show is entirely interview based, that's a little harder because you have to come up with 10 to 20 people who might be willing to interview you. Doing that is really helpful. And like figuring out, you know, what do you actually want the format of the show to be? Do you want it to be an interview? Do you want it to be casual sit down and chat? Like, how long do you want your episodes to be? And the more I produce new shows, the more little things come up where I'm like, oh, that would have been a good thing to think about beforehand. Like we just launched this new show that's like kind of a politics podcast. And like a snag we hit was that iTunes sometimes takes 2 weeks.
It's a weird platform.
It's awful, but you need it. You need it to succeed, but it's awful. And like, I told these guys like, yeah, we can launch on this date. And like, we couldn't launch on that date because iTunes hadn't accepted their feed yet because we only submitted it like 4 days before because I thought 4 days would be enough time because sometimes it's like 2 days. And so they had to push their launch a week. And I was like, okay, that's never happening for us again. But yeah, that's it. Like you figure out what you can do and then you do it. And that's cool. That's huge.
What's kind of like the next kind of like big goals?
In terms of like personal goals within the network, I, at this point myself, have recorded over 300 podcasts, which when I think about how much actual time goes into all of that, I think I might be getting close to my 10,000 hours. You know, that like, that
the mystical,
yeah,
like the number of like, you're an expert once you've hit 10,000.
Yeah. I would love to get to a point where I'm doing enough stuff like this that I feel like it's my full-time job, you know?
Well, you are treating it, I want to say, close to a full-time job.
Yeah, close to. But that's it. Like, I'd like to get to a point where, like, I can quit my other job, where I can spend 40 hours a week doing podcast things, getting paid for it, have it be the main thing I do. And I'd like to get to a point where I'm doing it and getting called in as a guest on things, right? Like, this is really cool for me. 1 guest spot per month. I think I might make that my goal for this year, for the rest of this year. Because every time I get to do a guest spot with someone else's show, it's so fun for me. It's so, like, it's validating in a way that, like, doing my own shows isn't. Because, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, but I do. It's because it's one of those things where I know personally it's, like, it's easy to kind of get fed into, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm feeding my own fire.
Right.
And not realizing that there is impact from it at all.
Right.
Again, I always find it funny where, because a lot of times I will get in my own head and I'm like, okay, cool. I'm just going to keep on pushing out. But then you don't get that validation unless like you can't, like someone else like, oh, you're actually doing something cool. Right. And it has to be more than like just like a liking on like Facebook or Instagram or anything because that's cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus like someone reaching out and be like, oh, hey, can you do this? Like, can you come in and use your own time? Thank you so much for making me feel like I'm important. What's kind of like the next kind of like big goals in terms of network?
I would love to be able to pay anyone who has an actual job at the network so that they have an actual job instead of it just being like a role you play with the understanding that eventually you might get paid for it if we have money. You know, everyone's passionate about what they're doing, but passion only gets you so far. Like, the reality is people have needs that money fulfill, right? Like, you need to pay your bills, you need to pay your rent, you need to feed your family or your dog. Eventually, like, if you're not getting paid for the things you're passionate about, eventually they take a backseat to the things that pay you. And I don't want that to be true, right? So that's goal number one, money. Other goal, I want us to have 20 shows on the network by the end of this year, because it's nice to have kind of a range, you know? Like, I'd like to bring in at least one show that's not even Montreal based. I always say we're like Montreal's fastest growing podcast network, not as a rule that we have to be from Montreal, but just because we're here. But
and
like,
just because it's fact.
And a big goal, I think, is to get to a point where we have like more than one studio operating the way we operate, right? And that, I think, is not a goal for this year. I think that's a goal for later down the line. But I'd love to be able to say, like, you know, we have our model that we use at our NDG studio, and find another person who shares those values, who wants to open a second space that operates the exact same way, and like just increases the amount of stuff we can be putting out that way.
So I'm really interesting, because you put these goals out there. And then a lot of times, like, you have actually hit a lot of goals. Like, again, like, you failed a lot along the way as well.
Sure, yeah.
But
how dare you?
How dare I? That's true. Like, do you know how many times I've failed in my life? Countless.
People need to fail. You need to fail all the time. Yeah.
And it's the uncomfortable truth of, like, you actually, like, if you're not failing, you're kind of doing things too safe.
Yeah, exactly. There's your soundbite for Instagram later.
I know.
Yeah.
How do you, like, keep yourself in check of, like, actually, like, doing something when you set it the goal? Like, what is that process like a lot of time for you?
Yeah. I'm a person who cannot set individual goals and get them done. For me, two things need to happen in order to get something done. The first is that I need to put it out there like I did just now, so that, like, you know, if someone is listening and wants to hold me accountable, they will, right? A lot of our supporters on Patreon for Up for Discussion, if I mention something that I think is a cool idea, will follow up with me later. Like, I think especially of Kendall and Aldridge, who's like VIP status, like one of the patrons who is the like most involved with our show. Like, if I ever made a Facebook group for audience members to interact with each other, I would make her the moderator. Like, she's that level person, you know? And like, she will follow up on stuff like that. If I say something that she thinks, hey, that's a cool idea, she'll be like, so what are you doing with that? Are you going to do that? And having that out there in the world makes me feel like I need to do it, which like lights the fire a little bit. And the other thing is like getting people to care about it. That's what it takes for me to accomplish goals. It's, you know,
it's the accountability.
It's the accountability
of someone else kind of expecting it. And
yeah,
no, I understand that.
Yeah.
Beyond belief.
It's just that, like, in my mind, as soon as someone else might follow up on it, I have to do it. If you surround yourself with good people, you surround yourself with a community that cares, you're going to get things done. And it's going to feel really good doing it. Because the reality is, like, unless you have a budget or it's your full-time job to promote your own stuff, you're not going to see exponential growth suddenly happen, right? Like, you need to really be able to invest in that. And so if you are in my situation where you can create content week after week, but you don't necessarily have 40 hours of marketing time, like, or a huge marketing budget, getting to 10,000 might mean like very slowly getting to 1,000 and then very slowly getting to 2,000 and like going from there, right?
In terms of like being okay with kind of like the slow growth, how do you keep that patience?
I'm satisfied if a month is in the top 3 of the past year. So like if we have, you know, say 2,000 downloads in September, but, you know, we're consistently in the top 3, I'm happy. I'd love if every month is better than the last month. I'd love that. At this point, though, because March was a bad month, I'm like, as long as April's better than March and February were, I'll be happy, because we had a dip in the winter, and that happens. April so far has already passed March. And so, like, for me, like, I know now I will be at least satisfied that it was better than last month. If the trend continues till the end of this month and we, you know, then would be double March, that would be even better. But like, I'd be happy, like, as long as things are not dipping radically and like, you know, we're losing people and like our patrons are leaving, like, because I feel like at that point it would mean that I did something wrong. And like, I try so hard to keep making the show better that, like, you know, when we do something that people don't like, and they tell me, I'm like, okay, we're not going to do that again. Like that was the thing we tried. We've tried like, format things and segments that people haven't really, vibed with, and we've just gotten rid of them. Like, I think that the format we have now is great. People seem to like it, and it's giving us a lot of space to sort of, have a good time with it and like get deeper when we need to. And like, yeah, but I don't know, from week to week how our numbers are going to be. You can't let yourself be obsessed with that because it's potentially going to crush you. You never know when the internet's just going to screw you. It's always kind of random. Like you can count on like your core audience to listen, but if your core audience is 100 people and 20 of them don't listen that week, you're going to be like, oh shit, I lost 20% of my core audience this week. Mm-hmm. They might listen to it 2 weeks later. They might just be on Christmas holidays, right? You don't know. Like you don't know what's going on in people's lives. You don't know if like iTunes was just down that morning and people couldn't get their new episodes, right? Like there's so many factors that if you're not putting money into it, you kind of have to just do your thing, put it out there, and like trust that it's worth doing. The show you're making is not about you. It's about the community that it serves. But you should figure out who is the community this is serving. Because if this is just a podcast that you think would be fun to do, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. But you should think about like, okay, who will benefit from it, right? Who will benefit from it? How can I respect them and make it as good as possible for them? And like, how can I bring them into it? How can I get the community involved, right? And that's where things like Patreon are really useful, because you can see through Patreon who in your community cares about it enough to invest money in it. Podcasting is like the most vulnerable medium. It is the most directly in touch with its audience in terms of like physical closeness, right? Because like people who are listening to this have put us in their ears or over their ears, depending on what kind of headphones they're using. Or maybe we're in their car with them. But most people who listen to podcasts have earbuds in, right? Mm-hmm. And if they're trusting you to be in their ears, like you owe them your best.
That is a great thought, I think, to end on.
Sure.
Thank you once again, Tom.
Thanks for
spending time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. There's a lot that we touched upon. And it's interesting because it's like it's worlds colliding a little bit, where it's like showcasing both like the creator side, but then trying to pull out some of the entrepreneurial things.
Yeah.
That we don't think about a lot of times.
Right.
Yeah.
So. Well, anytime you want to, talk shop.
I'm always going to call you to talk shop.
Yeah, of course. Of course. That's like, yeah, you're like the person that I have for that. Like, I don't have anyone else in my life who like I regularly meet up with to just kind of be like, let's get philosophical about this crazy shit we're doing. I like that.
Because like creatives, we just don't do that often.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Cool.
I like that you have made it your content. It's smart.
Thank you.
It gives you an excuse to have conversations like this.
Oh, I know. Once again, thanks to Tom for being our guest this week.
My pleasure.
This week we're produced by me and edited by me. Basically, everything was me. But yeah, and obviously our podcast is sponsored by Chaos. If you're interested in creating video, podcasts, any kind of content in your business, definitely check us out at createchaos.com. Till the next episode, have a good one.